Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. I work as a contract manager for a mid-sized engineering firm, which means I spend my days poring over legal documents and making sure every detail is perfect. After 15 years of saving and planning, I finally had enough money to buy my dream house. The place wasn't huge, but it had everything I wanted. A quiet suburban neighborhood, a large backyard, and most importantly, a beautiful in-ground swimming pool. The house was listed as having nearly half an acre, with the pool situated at the far end of the property. Behind the backyard was a small wooded area that belonged to the community, separated by an old chain-link fence that looked like it had been there for decades. The real estate agent mentioned that the previous owner was an elderly woman who had lived there alone for 20 years and rarely used the yard. During the walkthrough, I specifically asked about property lines and any HOA restrictions. The agent assured me that while there was an HOA, it was pretty laid back and mostly just handled basic maintenance of common areas. The pool was definitely private property, she confirmed, showing me the survey from when the house was built. I closed on the house in early May, just as the weather was getting warm enough to think about swimming. The first few weeks were busy with moving and getting settled, but I was looking forward to finally enjoying that pool I had dreamed about for so long. The HOA president introduced herself during my second week there. She was a woman in her 50s who seemed overly friendly in that fake way some people have. She brought me a welcome basket with some cookies and a thick binder of HOA information. She told me how wonderful it was to have new blood in the neighborhood and mentioned something about how everyone here was like one big family who shared everything. At the time, I thought she was just being neighborly, but looking back, I should have paid more attention to that comment. The first real sign of trouble came on a Saturday afternoon in early June. I had been looking forward to my first proper swim all week. The weather was perfect, hot and sunny with just enough breeze to keep it comfortable. I had just settled into my pool float with a cold drink when I heard voices coming from the back of my yard. I looked over to see two teenage kids and what appeared to be their friends walking confidently through the gate in the chain-link fence. They were carrying pool toys and towels, clearly planning to jump right into my pool like they owned the place. I quickly got out of the water and grabbed my towel. The teens seemed surprised to see me there, which was odd considering it was my own backyard. I asked them politely what they were doing, and one of them just shrugged and said they were going for a swim like they always did. I explained as calmly as I could that this was private property and they couldn't just use my pool without permission. They seemed genuinely confused, insisting that everyone used the pool and that it had never been a problem before. After some back and forth, they reluctantly left, but I could tell they thought I was being unreasonable. The whole thing left me feeling uneasy. I spent the rest of the weekend wondering if I had misunderstood something about the property or if there was some kind of arrangement I wasn't aware of. I dug out all my closing documents and reviewed them carefully, but everything clearly showed the pool was on my private land. I didn't have to wait long for clarification. The HOA president showed up at my door the very next day, and she was no longer the sweet, welcoming neighbor from before. She had that binder with her again, this time open to various pages that she had highlighted and bookmarked. She launched into this whole speech about neighborhood traditions and community spirit. According to her, the pool had always been considered a community asset because of its location near the woods and because the previous owner had allowed everyone to use it. She claimed there were provisions in the HOA bylaws about promoting community activities and sharing resources. I listened patiently and then explained that regardless of what the previous owner might have allowed, I owned the property now, and the pool was clearly on my private land according to the survey and deed. I told her I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I had a right to control access to my own property. She wasn't having any of it. She got increasingly agitated, insisting that I was being selfish and that my attitude was going to ruin the friendly atmosphere of the neighborhood. She actually had the nerve to suggest that I should be grateful to contribute to the community and that HOAing the pool for myself was against the spirit of suburban living. When I stood firm and told her the discussion was over, she stormed off muttering something about how we would see about that. I had a bad feeling this was just the beginning. Over the next couple of weeks, things escalated quickly. I started getting these official-looking notices in my mailbox claiming I was violating HOA regulations. One accused me of failing to maintain a community asset. Another claimed I had erected an unauthorized barrier by locking the gate to the backyard. The whole thing was ridiculous, but it was also stressful. I had moved to this neighborhood specifically because I wanted peace and quiet, not to get into fights with entitled neighbors. I tried to ignore the notices, figuring they had no legal standing since the pool was clearly on my property. Then I started hearing from other neighbors. Some seemed genuinely confused about why I wouldn't share the pool, suggesting that maybe we could work out some kind of schedule. Others were more direct, telling me that I was causing unnecessary drama and that everyone had gotten along fine before I moved in. I realized the HOA president had been busy spreading her version of events around the neighborhood. According to the stories I was hearing, I was the unreasonable newcomer who was trying to take away something the community had enjoyed for years. The situation reached a breaking point when I found flyers posted around the neighborhood advertising a community pool party at my address. The flyer was bright and cheerful, complete with clip art of people swimming and grilling. It announced a grand 4th of July celebration with swimming, barbecue, and fun for the whole family. My address was listed as the location, and the event was scheduled for the upcoming holiday weekend. At the bottom, it was signed by the HOA Social Committee, with the president's name prominently displayed. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a planned invasion of my property. I realized I had tried the polite approach long enough. If they wanted to escalate things, I was going to make sure I was prepared. The first thing I did was hire a professional surveying company to conduct a new, official survey of my property. I wanted absolutely current documentation that would hold up in court if necessary. The surveyor came out the following week and did a thorough job using GPS equipment and checking against county records. When he finished, he confirmed what I already knew. The pool was entirely on my private property, but he also found something interesting that I hadn't expected. The old chain-link fence that separated my yard from the community woods was actually installed about 18 inches inside my property line. This meant that not only was I right about owning the pool, but the HOA, or the previous owner, had actually been encroaching on my land with their fence. Armed with this new information, I decided it was time to get legal advice. I found a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and HOA issues. When I showed her all the documentation, the original deed, the new survey, the violation notices, and the party flyer, she got this look on her face like she had just been handed an early Christmas present. She explained that I had an incredibly strong case and that the HOA president was creating massive liability for the association with her actions. The planned pool party was essentially organized trespassing, which could result in both civil and criminal penalties. Her advice was strategic. Instead of sending a warning or trying to stop the party ahead of time, she suggested I let them proceed with their plan. That way, I would have undeniable evidence of their trespassing and could pursue maximum damages. Following her instructions, I installed high-quality security cameras covering my entire backyard and the gate area. I also placed small but clearly visible no trespassing signs along the actual property line as established by the new survey. Then, I waited for the 4th of July weekend. The morning of the party, I could see people starting to gather in the community area behind my fence. I stayed inside and watched through my security cameras as the HOA president led a group of about 30 people through my gate and into my backyard. They came prepared for a full party. Someone set up a portable grill, others brought coolers full of food and drinks, and the kids immediately started inflating pool toys. They spread out across my lawn like they owned the place, with several people jumping right into my pool without any hesitation. I let them get settled for about 15 minutes, making sure my cameras captured everything. Then I walked outside and calmly announced that everyone was trespassing on private property and needed to leave immediately. The reaction was immediate chaos. Some people looked confused and started gathering their things, but the HOA president stepped forward and got right in my face. She started yelling about how this was a community pool and I had no right to kick everyone out. Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and called 911. I could hear her telling the dispatcher that a hostile resident was threatening families during a sanctioned community event. She was laying it on thick, making it sound like I was some kind of dangerous person who was attacking innocent neighbors. 2 police officers arrived about 10 minutes later. They looked tired and probably thought they were dealing with just another petty neighborhood dispute. The HOA president immediately intercepted them and launched into her story about how I was being aggressive and trying to deny access to what she claimed was community property. When one of the officers asked for my side of the story, I stayed completely calm. I had prepared for this moment carefully. I handed him a folder containing copies of my property deed, the certified survey results, and photos of the no trespassing signs I had posted. I explained that this was a simple property dispute that had escalated to trespassing. I pointed out the survey stakes that marked my actual property line and noted that everyone currently in my backyard was clearly on private land. The officer examined the documents carefully. I could see his expression change as he realized this wasn't the simple neighborhood squabble he had expected. He walked over to check the survey markers and the signs I had posted. When he came back, he looked directly at the HOA president and told her that the survey was clear and everyone needed to pack up and leave immediately. She tried to argue about the fence and claimed there must be some mistake, but the officer cut her off. That's when I delivered the information my lawyer had told me to save for this moment. I explained that the survey had also revealed that the existing fence was improperly installed on my land, but that I would be addressing that issue through proper legal channels. The HOA president's face went completely white. She realized that not only had she been wrong about the pool, but the HOA had actually been encroaching on my property for years. The officer stayed to make sure everyone left peacefully, and I watched from my deck as the party broke up in awkward silence. The following Monday, my lawyer sent a comprehensive letter to the HOA board. It included a cease and desist order prohibiting any HOA member from entering my property, a demand for the HOA to pay for removing the old fence and installing a new privacy fence on the correct property line, reimbursement for the survey costs, and a warning that any further harassment would result in a lawsuit. The response was swift. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that week, and I received a call from their lawyer within days. Faced with undeniable evidence and the threat of expensive litigation, they agreed to all my demands. The fallout for the HOA president was severe. When the other residents learned that her actions had nearly cost them thousands of dollars in legal fees and potential special assessments, she was voted off the board at the next meeting. Several neighbors who had attended the pool party even came to my door to apologize personally. A month later, I was floating peacefully in my pool, surrounded by a beautiful new 6-foot privacy fence that the HOA had paid to install. The old chain-link fence was gone, and my property line was clearly established. I had not only won the battle, but had also ensured my privacy and peace of mind for years to come. Looking back, I think the whole situation taught everyone involved an important lesson about property rights and the limits of HOA authority. The HOA president learned that enthusiasm and good intentions don't override legal property boundaries. The HOA board learned to be more careful about the actions they endorse. And I learned that sometimes being polite isn't enough. Sometimes you have to stand up for your rights with documentation and legal backing. The neighborhood has been quiet ever since. I still get the occasional wave from neighbors when I'm out in my yard, and the relationship with the new HOA board is professional and respectful. Most importantly, I can finally enjoy the pool I worked so hard to afford, knowing that my property rights are protected and clearly established. The security cameras are still there, more out of habit than necessity now. But sometimes when I'm swimming laps in the evening, I remember that chaotic 4th of July afternoon and can't help but smile. It turns out that all those years of reading contracts and paying attention to legal details prepared me perfectly for defending what was mine. Update. 6 months later, I thought the story was over after the fence was installed, but apparently the drama wasn't quite finished. A few people have been asking for an update, so here's what happened in the months following my pool party showdown. The immediate aftermath was actually pretty amusing. Within a week of the fence going up, I started getting friend requests on social media from people in nearby neighborhoods who had heard about what happened. Apparently, the story had spread beyond just my HOA, and I had become something of a local legend among people dealing with their own entitled neighbors. One guy from a neighborhood about 10 minutes away reached out to tell me his HOA was trying to claim his hot tub was a community amenity. He ended up using my lawyer and got it sorted out quickly. It seems my case had set a precedent that other lawyers in the area were using to shut down similar overreach attempts. The former HOA president didn't take her defeat well. About 2 months after losing her position, she put her house up for sale. But here's where it gets interesting. She was having trouble selling because potential buyers kept asking questions about the HOA drama. Apparently, word had gotten around, and people were worried about buying into a neighborhood with that kind of dysfunction. Her real estate agent actually contacted me to ask if I would be willing to provide a statement saying the issues had been resolved. I politely declined, figuring it wasn't my responsibility to help her fix the mess she had created. She ended up selling for about $15,000 less than her asking price and moved to a different state. The new HOA board turned out to be much more reasonable. They implemented new policies requiring board approval before any member could make claims about community property or send official notices to residents. They also hired a property management company to handle the day-to-day operations, which took a lot of the personality conflicts out of the equation. One of the funniest developments was that my pool actually did become something of a community asset, just not in the way the former president had intended. Several of my immediate neighbors and I worked out an informal arrangement where they could use the pool occasionally in exchange for helping with maintenance and upkeep. The difference was that this was done properly, with my permission and clear boundaries. People would text me ahead of time to ask if they could bring their kids over for a swim, and everyone respected the fact that it was still my private property. It ended up being exactly the kind of neighborly cooperation that should have happened from the beginning. The legal costs ended up being completely covered by the HOA's insurance, plus they had to pay my lawyer's fees as part of the settlement. My lawyer told me later that the insurance company was furious with the former president because her actions had created exactly the kind of liability they specifically warn against. There was also an unexpected bonus to the whole situation. The property management company that the HOA hired reached out to me about doing consulting work for them. Apparently, my systematic approach to documenting everything and understanding property law impressed them, and they occasionally hire me to review contracts and help with similar disputes. The security camera footage from the pool party incident actually became training material for the property management company. They use it to show HOA boards what not to do and how quickly situations can escalate when people don't understand property rights. My house value also went up significantly, partly because of the new fence and landscaping, but also because the HOA drama actually ended up making the neighborhood more desirable. Potential buyers saw that the community had dealt with its problems and now had professional management and clear policies. The best part of the whole update is that I've been able to enjoy 3 full swimming seasons in complete peace. The pool has been everything I dreamed it would be when I first bought the house. I've hosted legitimate pool parties with friends and family, taught my nieces and nephews how to swim, and spent countless hours just relaxing in the water. Sometimes I still run into people around town who recognize me as the guy who stood up to the HOA. Most of them want to shake my hand and tell me their own stories about dealing with entitled neighbors or overzealous associations. It's become a surprisingly effective icebreaker at social events. The former president's replacement as HOA president is a retired teacher who focuses on actual community improvement projects rather than trying to control individual property owners. Under her leadership, they've organized neighborhood cleanups, improved the walking trails in the common areas, and even installed some nice benches in the woods behind my house. Looking back on the whole experience, I realize it taught me a lot about the importance of standing up for yourself, but also about how to do it the right way. I could have escalated things emotionally or gotten into shouting matches, but staying calm and relying on facts and documentation was much more effective. The story has also become a cautionary tale in our area about the importance of understanding property law before making claims about community assets. Several other HOAs have quietly revised their policies after hearing about what happened, and a few have even hired lawyers to review their existing agreements and make sure they're not overstepping their authority. My lawyer has stayed in touch and occasionally sends me articles about similar cases around the country. Apparently, this kind of overreach is more common than I realized, but most people don't fight back because they don't understand their rights or don't want to deal with the hassle. I'm glad I took the time to do things properly. Not only did I protect my own property rights, but I apparently helped protect other homeowners in the area from similar problems. The precedent set by my case has made it much harder for HOAs around here to make unreasonable claims about private property. The final update is that I recently got a letter from the new property management company thanking me for my role in helping to professionalize HOA operations in our area. They mentioned that insurance claims related to property disputes have dropped significantly since my case became well known among local boards. So that's the full story. What started as a simple desire to enjoy my own swimming pool turned into a neighborhood legal drama, but ultimately resulted in positive changes for everyone involved. I've got my privacy, my property rights are clearly established, and the neighborhood is better managed than ever before. And yes, I'm still swimming laps every evening when the weather's nice, still surrounded by that beautiful fence that the HOA paid for. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Let's call my a-hole boss Eugene, since his stinginess reminds me of Eugene Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, except Krabs is nowhere near malicious. In order to display the full satisfaction of this revenge, I will have to describe a few, but not limited, things Eugene did that entitles him to being a complete jackass. For the context, Eugene owns a small company that provides artistic services of some sort and never hired full-timers, which I later learned that it was due to his stinginess. Initially, when I saw the open part-time position, I thought it was ideal for me as I had external commitments and needed some sort of income. The job offers about $550 USD per month. I don't live in the US, this is a rough conversion, but only required me to clock in about 90 hours a month. It wasn't a very good offer, but good enough for me as I considered myself to be inexperienced in field. Note that Eugene had seen my portfolio and knew my ability level before hiring me. The first couple of months was fine. I worked the hours I was supposed to and got paid accordingly, occasionally extending my shift at my own time due to the nature of the work, but I didn't mind. I guess Eugene saw this as an advantage he could exploit later on during my employment. It is also important to note that Eugene would often ask about my well-being, how did I spend my weekends, etc. At this point in time, it all seemed like courtesy talk, so I didn't pay much attention to it. He would ask about my previous employment and my reason for leaving, which I answered honestly that their work system was unsuitable for me. This will be important later. Eugene gradually began to grow more impatient towards me, often blaming me for not being able to match up to his ability. Remember when I was inexperienced, thus the pay rate? Eugene had over a decade of experience in this expertise, and he expected me to be at his level when I was only 3 months in. The stress was intense, and I began working longer hours just to keep up and produce work at the best quality I could. I was under the belief that if I worked hard enough, my effort will speak. Even though this was only a part-time position, I overcommitted my time there and took pride in my work. My external commitments were barely scraping by. I was exhausted, but thought I was doing a good job until Eugene spoke to me one day. Eugene pulled me into his office and lectured me on my work etiquette, saying that I wasn't putting enough effort. He was considering letting me go. At this point, I was beyond confused. Did he really not see the effort I put in? Was I delusional in thinking that I was actually doing well and my work had been improving? I tried speaking up, but he quickly diverted the topic, telling me he knew the reason why my previous employer hated me. It was because I was lazy and uncommitted. To say I was in disbelief was an understatement. Not only did I believe I did my best with every task handled to me, Eugene had registered my flaws during casual conversations and twisted my words to his advantage. I had no idea how to react and simply asked him what expected of me. He instantly replied that he would like me to double my hours working for him at the same monthly pay rate. His reasons? It's my fault that I am not experienced enough to produce quality work, thus it should be under my own responsibility and time to make up for it. My external commitments didn't matter, he said, as this job was my only source of income and should be kept as priority. It finally dawned to me that Eugene was a narcissistic sociopath who was only held conversations so that he could learn a person's weaknesses for his manipulation. Now, if you read my title, you will see that Eugene was not only a narcissist, but also stingy AF. Eugene is obsessed with maximizing his profits. Any business owner would love that, I agree, but Eugene is down to every cent in immoral and even possibly illegal ways. He would sell a service to a client and upon receiving the deposit, deliver something else. He was smart enough to keep his contracts vague for both clients and employees, so that nobody could not take legal actions against him. More than often, his clients would be left to wit's end, as it would be too late and expensive to engage another vendor by the time they realized they had been scammed. Eugene would then demand another set of payment to deliver what he had originally promised, overcharging the client an average of 100% to 200% more than what was agreed. Eventually realizing that they'd been played, most people would be too exhausted to pursue further action and prayed for the project to be over so they didn't have to deal with his antics anymore. This inaction probably fed Eugene's ego that he could get away playing dirty every time. There are many more things I would like to rant about Eugene, but this is pro-revenge sub, not recruiting hell, so most of you would like to get to the good stuff soon. So in my country, employers are required to pay a certain amount of tax for every local employee they hire. While it is not exactly tax, it is obligated by law, and negligence will result in a hefty fine and possibly jail time. These taxes are technically contributions for the employee's retirement funds, which is payable by every employer. Employer can deduct a certain percentage of the contributions from the employee's wages. This law has its own complications, since there are a certain group of people exempted from it, such as students or interns. Now, Eugene is the classic example of narcissist who thinks that he is smarter than everyone else. He felt that he was smart enough to evade the law by drafting a contract with vague details to protect himself, and was deluded enough to believe that everyone would believe him as long as he sounded convincing. In other words, he thought of people as sacks of potatoes with no opinion of their own. If anyone was to have a perspective, it had to be his way or the wrong way. I stayed in Eugene's company for about 4 months before I felt too mentally overwhelmed. On the day that I left, I called in to check on my contribution account, and just as I had expected, Eugene hadn't paid a single cent over the past 4 months. The officer on the other end of the line asked if I would like to report this as a case. Guess my answer. A week later, I received an update from the contribution board saying that Eugene had disputed my case, claiming that I was only an intern and thus exempted from the law. This jerk was playing dirty as a last attempt to steal from me. As I had mentioned, Eugene thought of himself as a smart man and probably felt that the officer would rule the case in his favor since he had world-class convincing skills and his vague contract would have protected him either way. Fine, Eugene. So you think you can get away just like any other time? You must have gotten pretty confident by now. Well, not this time, Eugene. I wrote a 2 pages long email to the contribution board officer with every reason and evidence I can find on how am I not an intern, like Eugene claimed. Knowing his antics, I went the extra mile to research all the exempted group and wrote every possible reason on how am I not in the category. Excessive? Yes. Worth it? Hell yes. I didn't hear from the officer for 2 weeks, and when I finally did, he informed me that Eugene had agreed to pay my contributions. Remember when I said employers are permitted to deduct a certain percentage from employees' wages? Due to his negligence, Eugene could no longer do that and had to pay the full amount, on top of the fines that incurred along with it. If he had dutifully abided by the law, it would have only costed him a third of what he had to pay. So that's a bit of a whole tax for you, Eugene. Now that I've gotten back what I was owed, I have decided to move on, but the story did not end there. An ex-colleague of mine, New Jersey, who is still working for Eugene, told me that during the 2 weeks I didn't hear from the officer, Eugene was busy fighting for his stand by giving every reason that I, an exempted individual. The officer, having seen my email, soon got tired of his nonsense and gave him a deadline to pay up or he'll be brought to court. NJ said he had never seen Eugene so defeated before. To top it off, it seemed like karma had finally caught up to him as he started losing more and more clients due to his unethical practices. The fine came to him when he had no clients that month, so it was a very obvious dent in his bank account. Ultimately, it was not a huge amount, but knowing Eugene's stinginess and ego, I think the damage was enough to qualify for this sub. The next one is a malicious compliance story. About 2 months ago, I worked for an absolute tyrant of an administrator. Dude was terrible. Terrible enough to warrant me writing in the apparent point of view of a 48-year-old teacher wishing he was Sigma. But I digress. Before working for this school, I was teaching 8th grade math, 4th grade math, or being an academic coach for the previous 18 or so years. I switched school primarily due to location. I found a school on the other side of the mountain I stare at nightly and figured it was a good match. Nope. This admin, we'll call him Poppin' Fresh, shut me down every step of the way. I entered the school middle of the school year with very rough kids, and my first day training the academic coach for the school and district trained us up on this math/ELA/anything-you-want gaming program called GimKit. I understand that GimKit isn't education in and of itself. It's simply a 5-minute tool to find out if kids know the content, and it engages the kids greatly. My first day with students, I saw their terrible behaviors. They ran 2 other teachers out of there, evidently. So I decided it was going to take a little bit of grace to get them to listen to me. I showed them GimKit. They had popped open their Chromebooks for no more than 30 seconds when TA, terrible admin Poppin' Fresh, came in and shut it down instantly. He never assesses the situation. He just sees kids on hokey-looking activities as he literally pops in the classroom, bouncing around like he's on something. Anyway, this happened all the time. I would instruct for no more than 8 minutes tops and walk around and help them with concepts the best I could. I would be walking around, he would pop in and tell me to change something. Like clockwork. Every program or strategy or center-based activity I try to use to get the 7th graders motivated gets shut down instantly, and he finally says out loud, "Teach only what's on the tests, nothing more." Bet. I took this as an opportunity to enter some MC with a side of, I can't believe I'm here. I start going by the book 100%. Anytime a student asks, why do we do it like this? When we are working on surface area and volume, I only say, that's not on the test. Anytime I naturally find an urge to find a connection to other standards, I stop myself. It's not on the test. Over a short amount of time, students are frustrated and sitting there yawning. It pains me greatly, so I decide to only apply my MC when good old Poppin' Fresh pops his way back into my classroom. He finally pops in with his boss's boss, and a couple of people I've never seen before. I instantly switch from my going deeper, thinking outside the box, activity-based learning to exactly what he wants. Teaching only what's on the test. I instantly turn into Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the kids instantly groan, saying, "Mr. OP, I hate when you teach us like this." Comments from the students fly about the room. This is the worst part of my day. I hate math now, thanks. And many much more colorful, expletive-laden commentary. Frank Caliendo even popped in for a spell. Now here's a guy who doesn't know how to motivate students. Boom! Poppin' Fresh even doubled down on his usual banter, putting on a show for his crew of bosses. These kids seem highly unmotivated, OP. We need to meet about this if you can't get them engaged. I interjected, "You said to only teach what's on the test, so that's what I'm doing. Only, what's on the test, right? Like if they wanted to know why this happens or that happens or how to solve this a different way, that's not on the test, right? You told me just to be up and be teaching and never have them on their Chromebooks, right?" I said this to him in definite earshot of his accompanying party, mainly because I had a feeling these were the head honchos. The ones who signed off on spending all that money to make our school a true one-to-one school. A school where every student has a Chromebook. Not utilizing the Chromebooks is something I knew that was something Pop and Fresh believed in, but I had a feeling that the district would want the kids properly utilizing them. He answered back to me, "I only stopped you from using the Chromebooks because the kids were all just playing games." The students interject then, "It's a math game." The head honcho moved to Interjection City. "Well, let's see what this math game is all about." I had the kids get their Chromebooks. They all excitedly logged on. I pulled up a surface area and volume gimkit, and the kids were feverishly playing the game, using pencils and notebooks to solve the problems needed to be answered to gain ammunition in their game. It was active. It was fun for all. I paused the game when needed to show different ways to isolate the variable when solving surface area problems, especially of spheres and cones, etc. It was what education was supposed to be. Pop and Fresh ran out of pop, and by the end of the day I received an email from the head honcho himself asking me about him and how things were going. I was honest with him. I told him about his assaults, threats of assaults, and hiding assaults. All things that I'm sure would be an interesting part of this tale, but they aren't related to the MC inherent here. It's also an ongoing investigation even 2 months later as I'm teaching at a new school on the other side of the proverbial mountain. Pop and Fresh is under investigation for what he's been doing to me and other new teachers to the school, and it's crawling all the way up the chain. Anyway, thank you for watching.